could you tell me a bit about why you have attended the Black Lives Matter protest today?
I was actually contacted by one of the organisers to come and speak today. It does matter to me a lot because obviously what's been happening around the world and definitely in America, we all know the story about George Floyd and the events that have surrounded it. I think it's quite important that we show our support really, and not only for people of any ethnicity, but I believe personally that colour doesn't come into it. I think we are all humans and we all should stand up for one another regardless of race and colour or religion, and show support of any type of killing or atrocity or any type of victimization.
So if everyone's here for the protest, could they please make their way over to the cones? Please be wary of social distancing.
Ella, how are you feeling? It's just about to start. What are your thoughts so far?
So I'm nervous. I hope it goes okay. I hope that we really get the message across to people. And I hope it all goes good.
Has the setting up been all right so far?
It's been a bit stressful, but we're just about to now get people into their spaces. And
okay.
There's a lot of people here already. I know you're Ella's father.
Yep.
What are your thoughts about it so far? It's obviously about to start.
Well, I'm incredibly impressed with the number of people who are turning up for such a small place, and also I'm impressed by the organisation that Ella and the other young people involved
take as many photos as you like and share them around.
Managed to get in place in a week since I think they decided that they would do this. I think after Ella went to the demonstration in Hereford, she was inspired to come and try and do the same thing in Ludlow. And in this short time, we got marshals, PAs, social distancing being observed, really carefully, people with masks. I think it's amazing, really. And I think it's a really important thing that Ludlow, a small market town, shows that there are people here who also want to stand up and show that they are part of this worldwide protest against racism.
What are your thoughts about the protest and how do you think it's going to go?
Well, I'm already quite impressed with how many people have turned up, which is great, because, Ludlow isn't sort of often, it can be a bit stuck in the mud. It's good. And people so far are kind of working their way out and socially distancing, which is obviously good too.
for everyone who's arriving, could you please socially distance?
So why are you here at the protest today?
Just to support, really, and show that we, as Ludlow, even though Ludlow's not a particularly representative place culturally, we support people and we stand with them.
Stand in solidarity.
What do you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement?
I think it's really important. I think it highlights a lot of the systemic racism that is present and that is sort of ignored by a lot of British media and Britain in general.
And then when people think that there is no racism in England, they think that it doesn't exist. They are part of the problem. Because we have slept on racism for far too long and we need to take a stand up against it now. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Yeah, let's give up to Black Lives Matter. My biggest worries in life concern whether the local cafe has soya milk, whether or not this speech goes well, whether I get the grades I need for uni, or wondering how long the line for Tesco's will be next time we go for our weekly shop. We don't know how lucky we are. But since when did having human rights become a game of Monopoly? Wrong place at the wrong time, roll the dice and you're in prison. You're kidding if you think that there's a get out of jail free card. This game isn't as colourful when all people see is black and white.
We like to pretend that racism occurred hundreds of years ago and equate such beliefs with the slave trade, a time when we didn't know any better. So I should tell you that black people in America were only legally allowed to vote in 1965. That was 55 years ago, not even one man's lifetime. Racism, therefore, hasn't just miraculously managed to eradicate itself within this short span of time. To understand black history is to understand our own recent history. Many have thought, why should we bother for a protest in Ludlow? The issues are American. Well, I don't need to convince anyone here that the issues are more than just American, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. But I think what is worth asking is what can one small, majority-white, middle-class town do to stop something so huge and equally vague as systematic racism? I think the answer, in short, is a simple one: acknowledgement. Acknowledge that we can do better. Acknowledge the names of black people and their families that we have let down. Acknowledge that we have a responsibility to educate ourselves and make changes to the school curriculum. Acknowledge that we have a long way to go, but it can be done. And that's why we're here today, to acknowledge.
Being an imam of the Muslim community in Craven Arms, it's necessary that I inform you of what Islam teaches about slavery. Islam came to abolish slavery. And the Prophet Muhammad's last sermon, he said in this last sermon, 100,000 people were present, and he said in Arabic, and I will mention the Arabic, لا فضل لعربي على أجمي ولا لعجمي على عربي كلكم سواء ألا بالتقوى يا قريش. He said there is no preference of a white person upon a black person, and nor for a black person upon a white person. ولا فضل لعربي, and there is no preference for an Arab over a non-Arab, and nor for a non-Arab over an Arab. And then he said, Allah, listen carefully, O people of Quraysh, because that's who he was referring to. Only with the fear of God will you attain, and through piety will you attain preference over one another. So he made it clear 1,400 years ago that there is no racism tolerated in Islam. Being from an Asian background, I personally think that it's not a matter of guilt, it's actually just a matter of going forward. Personally, I believe an English person standing in Ludlow today should not really feel guilty of what his forefathers had done, because he wasn't there at the time. But what we can do is just learn from mistakes, everybody. And it's not about race, it's not about color. I believe all of us should march forward and stop racism in all of its forms, to do with any, whether it's color, ethnicity, creed, or language.
First of all, I think it's really brilliant the way that Ella and her friends have organised this. I know they've faced quite a bit of abuse on some of the Facebook pages, and they've stood up to it magnificently. So it's really brilliant that they've organised this. We are all pretty angry and disgusted by the killing of George Floyd, and this has rightly sparked anger across Britain, Europe and America. It's amazing that this could happen in the 21st century, but it's not isolated, and we can find clear instances of racism here. Last year, the police recorded 7,257 incidents of racism in the West Midlands alone, and 300 people died in prison custody in the last year. That is the nature of injustice in our society, in our region.
And on history, there's this wacky idea that if you believe that Black Lives Matter, then somehow you're dedicated to the destruction of history. Well, no, because history is made by ordinary people, and it's a living and changing thing, and it needs to be. The history that we have to make needs to be about people, not bloody statues. Let's get our priorities right on that one. I think the organisers of this event, other people have said it, the organisers of this event have been absolutely brilliant, because what you've done is taken this forward. You have put anti-racism, you have put Black Lives Matter centre stage in Ludlow, and you know Ludlow cannot be this kind of sleepy little museum piece of a town. Ludlow has got to be part of the 21st century, part of the wider world, and we're richer and better off for that.
In the past few weeks have been very educational for me. I've learnt a lot and I have changed. I have to admit I was very naive. I am very lucky to have grown up in a family that is very accepting, very open-minded and very, very kind. I didn't know racism was such a problem, because the household I came from, we accepted everybody. I've been listening to black people's stories, and I've been thinking about my own beliefs, and I've realised I have a lot to learn. We need to address the problem that is in front of us, that the black community need our help, and I don't want to speak for them because I am not black. I am probably a pasty white person you're ever going to see. But I want to say my part. And basically, responding to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter is unfairly suggesting that we're saying only Black Lives Matter, when that obviously is not the case, as I'm sure we all know. When we say All Lives Matter is the response to Black Lives Matter, it's essentially saying that we should ignore the problem and just let it go away. We don't need to worry that supporting Black Lives Matter means that our culture, our laws and our arts, our religions and everything else is diminished. We're just showing our support for others and their struggles.
I live in this town and I went to school here, and I was the only person of colour in my school and most of the time in my classes, and you are always acutely aware of that fact, and it makes you feel sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, and people say things that they don't understand are racist, and so I think it's incredibly important to educate people and about race, and it has to be an open conversation. People need to understand that their words matter and they count. And yes, Black Lives Matter, but they matter, and they're important, and they should be loved, and they're more than matter.
I haven't come to give you statistics and facts and figures. I'm actually incredibly humbled to come to Ludlow and see so many faces who are non-black. I can't assume where you're all from, but it's incredibly humbling to see the support, to see the signs. And I know there was a lot of opposition to having a rally here, and I have to say thank you on behalf of myself, my family, all of my brothers and sisters all over the world, because it's in every community. It doesn't matter what colour the community is, but kindness is an important thing. And the past, people say the past is the past, and it's there to be learnt from. When you don't learn from the past, you repeat history. It's cyclical. You keep repeating the things you don't learn from. And I have to say, in small communities like this, which a previous speaker said, a very beautiful place, it's very beautiful to see people come out of their houses knowing they might get some flack for being here, standing in the rain in the middle of a field, it's going to be muddy soon, and actually give a voice, one voice, which supports black people all over the world. And beyond black people, anyone who's struggling, anyone who's a victim of oppression, it's a beautiful thing to see.
My white privilege prevents me from fully understanding what you suffer through every day, because it protects me from injustice. So I stand with you. I will use my privilege to try and shield you from the oppression that we created a long time ago.
It's so important to learn what we can proactively do to help, especially as white people. So first of all, just educate yourselves and just listen to what black people are telling us. You're going to get it wrong, you're going to be uncomfortable, but guess what? George Floyd was uncomfortable when that police officer was on his neck.
This is about power and division and ignorance, basically. Innocent ignorance. We need to be educated and know what's going on and absolutely stop this from being our reality.
I want everyone here today with me to make sure that this doesn't stop next week. This doesn't stop next month just because the hashtags have died. I'm going to make a commitment that I'm going to stand here and try and stop racism and everything else that is happening to people of ethnic minorities, and I want every single person here to make that commitment with me. It is no longer okay to be not a racist. We have to be anti-racist. We have to stand up in situations that we don't feel comfortable doing it.
I'm half Trinidadian, but I'm white Trinidadian. I have colour in my skin, and I've lived in different communities that have got different races and seen different ways that different people have dealt with that. And living in rural Britain, living in rural Shropshire, I've met lots of people in this community, and it's very beautiful and very lovely. And there is also a lot of ignorance around stuff here, and it's not because you don't want to help and you don't want to do things. It's because literally a lot of people have just never been opened to things.
We could all take a knee. It's going to get uncomfortable, but I just want you to think that your discomfort is nothing compared to what this man would have felt.
It's a really important issue that we all got to stand for. And it's really important to see everyone here, especially a small town where, you know, you didn't think that many people would come out. The group protesting the protest had more members than people joining the protest. So it's really good to see we had no opposition. We have a really, really positive turnout, actually. It was really good to see, really happy to be here.
Does the Black Lives Matter movement mean to you?
I think it just represents what's been missing in our culture for so long, you know. It just represents love and compassion and everything that we're missing towards the black community. And I think people need to recognise that this isn't just one day, one protest. It's years and years of work that will carry on, and we need to keep it going past the hashtags, past social media, and do things like contact your MP, demand change to your government, and listen to black people on what they're asking you to do, and be compassionate and just understanding and be willing to change. And that's what it means to me.